Good morning to those on the head table and to our specially invited guests. Allow me to identify them. We have the head of the private sector, Mrs. Tricia Tanis. We also have the Chief Executive Officer of the Private Sector Association and the Executive Director of the Barbados Employers Confederation, and we also have the head of the Chamber of Commerce as well. And we want to say a very special thank you this morning to you for attending this morning and supporting our conference and standing proxy for the other employers who would normally be here, but we have determined that it is about our members, it is their conference, and we thank you for making a very special effort to come out earlier and not just for the business session. I also want to recognize the Chief Labor Officer and the Deputy Chief Labor Officer, and I didn't ask the others to stand, but I would ask you to stand because these are the ones who support us day in and day out in the struggle. And they say all night. And they're also they're here, the Minister of Labor isn't with us. He's respecting his Sabbath, and we had, therefore, a very inspiring contribution this morning too from Senior Minister Kerry Simmons, who's standing in on behalf of the government. Also thanking our sisters from the BSTU, of course the General Secretary who brought the message, and my comrade and friend Don Grosvenor, who's also an executive member and who's always with us at our events. Also the Charge d'Affaires from Venezuela. She has become one of us very easily. It is through her effort that our education program has expanded and that we are offering Spanish, a course that's doing well. But beyond that, it is a partnership that continues to grow. And she also is here sometimes when we don't even invite because she likes being a part of the BWU. So, of course, our honorees as well, a very special good morning to you, Hopi. You know we got you on speed dial. And you're going to go learn how to put on these fancy tablecloths. So it is my duty, first of all, to give a special thank you. So as I welcome our specially invited guests, I also welcome all of you. And as I said before, thank you very much for coming out early, because I'm sure that our work here, or what is going to be relevant to us as we leave from here at the end of today, is not only found in the business session, but I'm sure that from start to finish in this opening ceremony, many of us could have identified and connected with a lot of what was said. First and foremost, I want to say a very special thank you to our featured speaker. He said in his remarks that many people sometimes don't want to hear an artist. But the irony is that's the very reason we chose Adrian Green to come and address our conference here this morning. That he makes people uncomfortable, including some of our staff members and council colleagues who at the start may have been sitting tense when he was going to present. It was also the expectation that we could be and maybe ought to be made uncomfortable, because it is comfort that sees us submitting to a colonial past and a colonial consciousness that causes the Barbados Workers Union to be begging workers, begging its members to stand up for the change you want to see. But people are fearful I want to protect the little dollar. It's all right for GS at all. I got my children. I got my this. A colonial consciousness that sees us in trap, where we would prefer to suffer in silence than to be uncomfortable and sweaty, if it comes to that, pursuing the change we want to see. I want to thank you, Adrian, for a very stirring presentation that connects us to ourselves, to our past, to the transformational mission that this country has embarked on, but above all, in a very real way, if there is nothing else that we remember as a takeaway from what you've said, is the need for us to update and overhaul our mindsets. And I'm comfortable with reset, but I'm more comfortable with reset with the new or the added definition that perhaps we didn't think through enough, that in that reset it must be transformative and not going back to the past that we spoke about, but being futuristic, overhauling, understanding that sometimes change, and most often to reach transformation, we will have to change a lot, and it starts with in here. So thank you very much for what I regard as a very inspiring presentation. We had our conference open by Minister Simmons. At the onset, I just want to thank you for clearly reading our report and our resolutions, because much of what you touched on is in fact what our conference will have to reflect on during the remainder of the day. The issue of contract work, we have a resolution coming on that. The campaign that we have in hotels, no, he didn't say hotels, but a lot of what he spoke about, I'm sure, is a lot of what hotel workers, not only hotel workers, but mainly hotel workers, because our conference is going to be hearing about the campaign that we are launching as it relates to workers in tourism. We had a very interesting meeting and useful meeting with the Barbados Employers Confederation recently. And in that, we were lamenting that the situation in the world of work has reached the point that it has, where it seems that unless workers down tools, they don't capture the attention of those who can and should be making a difference. And I just want to thank you, Minister, for reflecting what, in a few instances, you determined or said were your personal views, but also connecting those personal views for what the government's view is. A government that preaches enfranchisement must live it. And we thank you for restating and recommitting to ensuring that the government also lives it, being exemplar and practicing indeed everything that it preaches. To Miss Renice Bonnet, who gave a musical rendition too, we thank you for blessing us with your beautiful voice and breaking the monotony of the many words that we heard coming from the stage here this morning. And of course, I said already to our sister Cheryl Brathwaite, thank you for bringing us fraternal greetings. Comrades, it's about you. It's about you. And if we came here not being clear what it's about you means, I'm sure that after the many references, particularly from the feature presentation, that we understand now that it being about us or it being about you is being about your neighbor, each of your neighbors. There's a move, I would say, a wind of change that is sweeping across the BW family. and it is being observed across Barbados, being experienced not only by our members. We are not uncomfortable that even as we sense that there is momentum building, that we equally face a number of challenges coming at us, being hurled at us, challenges that don't make us feel uncomfortable because we understand the changes that we want to see. As I said before, comfort has kept us slaves to a colonial past and consciousness. Even coming into this conference a few days ago, we felt the spin-off from some who we might think should know better, but perhaps whose political consciousness mirrors their own colonial consciousness. And Adrian, like the slaves at Mount Wilton, those in St. Thomas, rather than standing with others who look like them, who were fighting for their own liberation, because it's about you, is not only fighting for self, but fighting for a class that had been an underclass. Rather than supporting their own, there are those who are so tied to the colonial past and whose consciousness causes them to try to undermine the very people that, like them, are fighting for the changes we want to see. Over the past 8 months, our campaign, It's About You, is one I would say that has been engaging, reaching out, reminding our members that we are valuing them, hearing them, respecting them, but most of all, asking members, asking workers of Barbados to know their worth. You have earned your respect, and it's time that we claim it. So as I remarked this morning, I'm encouraging us not to be distracted by what could be perceived as baseless or desperate or pitiful attempts to discredit the incredible strides that we are making. Equally, I am asking us that we will not be given to a sense of complacency. I have been hearing a lot coming from members of the public, as people would have recognized that for the past 8 months, there seems to be an industrial climate that is very observed with the presence of work stoppages and worker dislocation. We had it earlier this year with Transport Board, Duty Free Caribbean, UCAL, KFC, public workers. CXC results almost didn't come out last week, but they might not come out in January. We don't know yet. And we are seeing that because much of what is being experienced is a feeling from workers across the BW family that they're talked out. They've had enough. And it's time for some action to be taken beyond the words, because when words fail to bring results, something else has to be considered. I would say that if the Barbados Workers Union can be criticized for anything, it must not be lack of militants. Sometimes people feel that militants is only when you go out there and you have gloves on, and if you are sweating and on bullhorns and loudspeakers and keeping a lot of noise. But we have been very patient and deliberate at the table, because one of the things that the Barbados Workers Union, a mature organization of 82 years, is mindful of is that our actions will have ripple effects on the society that we are trying to build. I know that you would have seen that we have some fresh faces on our staff, and they're very eager and thirsty for some action. But what we have been training within the organization is that our methods are methods of industrial action where workers have to withdraw their labor, that is still the method of last resort. But the question often comes, how much is too much? How much talk is too much talk. I remember when I came into this organization, my predecessor and mentor, Sir Roy Trotman, caution at Mayday services, caution on the beach at Bronx Beach. Every opportunity the union had to present within a social partnership environment, that the moment will come when the opportunity for conversation will seem to be an opportunity that has passed. I don't believe that we are there yet, but I believe that we are fast approaching that point in time where change beyond the words is necessary. So it's about you. This message goes out to our hotel workers this morning in a very strong way. The Barbados Workers Union will be discussing in its business session that this season must not come and go without the respect that hotel workers must see. When COVID was upon us in a very real way, the hoteliers reached out to the union. They reached out to the government for concessions, for a little ease. Guess what? It was given. Is it fair to workers in the sector? Is it fair to many of those workers who are your family members, your neighbors, your friends, for an industry to be boasting that it is picking up or to be seeing positive change, but the workers in many respects are not seeing progress, not only not seeing progress, but sometimes find themselves worse off. We cannot be in an environment where we're going to be reporting changes to GDP and numbers of visitors in the positives and workers' experience being negative. So as we go into our business session, it's about you. It's not only about hotel workers, but why are hotel workers being singled out? Because the hotels represent what, for many of us, for this country, sugar was in years gone by, is the backbone of this country. And if the Barbados Workers Union cannot help workers in the industry to get it right for themselves, I don't know how much hope the rest of us should hold out that we can make any difference. So it's about you. Will envisages that through this campaign, we will right-size the industry for workers. I mean, I was commenting to the BEC a few days ago that those who lead the industry really help us, because each time the Barbados Workers Union goes public and says anything, they counter it. But yet the workers in the industry live exactly what we are saying. So each time they counter it, what happens is that our movement gains momentum. Because workers know that now is not the time. There's a time and place for everything, a season for everything. And this is not the time, it is not the season, but that season will come. I had an experience a few weeks ago. I attended a crop over event. I actually got to attend a crop over event. And it was just about a week after we had workers at KFC walking off the job because after talks were ongoing regarding the conditions that they had had to endure, those workers found that it got to the point no changes were being made and they had to withdraw their labor. And I was confronted by some person who is well known, and they asked me, how do you feel? How do you feel as a woman, a black woman, that you are spearheading actions that would be undermining the business of another black woman like yourself? I'm ashamed to tell you that I ain't spare a minute in responding. I said, you know, it should not be surprising to me that there's some of us, you're not a woman, but you're black just like me, who consider ourselves so far above and beyond that we can only see how an action is hurting those who engage in a form of modern-day slavery. Massa used to be white, but in many cases, Massa now looks just like us. Massa goes to school with us, or went to school with us. Massa goes to church with us. Massa sits in the pews and preaches to us. So I'm not surprised that some like you may think that way. But as a black woman, I do not consider myself undermining a black woman, certainly not like me, in business. I consider myself supporting the hundreds of black women who go to that institution daily and who are undermined and who are not guaranteed health and safe conditions of work. And I walked away. And I walked away feeling a little let down too in my response, because there was really more that was in my craw, right? But having been able to make it out to a crop over event, I embraced the season. I was able to get something, a libation, to move on from that point. Adrian, you were right. It's seasoned deep. It's seasoned deep in us. And it's about you, calls on all of us, whether we are employers, whether we are employees. Because when we look around this room, there's really no distinction. I was happy that Adrian in his speech in his address did not recognize me as one of the politicians. He only called on the minister. Grateful that he didn't. Grateful that perhaps, and I could take this opportunity to speak for him because he's not coming back to the mic, but grateful for the fact that perhaps he sees me first and foremost how I see myself, as a person in the fight for workers who is using politics to help to influence that fight, the outcome of that fight for you. The union will expect to get cussed for not doing. It will get cussed for the politics it is involved in. It will get cussed for being irrelevant. It will also get cussed for doing things to make itself relevant. We have been accustomed to that for the past 82 years. But one thing has been constant about our record, Comrade Arthur. One thing that has been constant about our record, Saroy, is that the Barbados Workers Union will deliver, even if our members do not consider in the moment that we are delivering for them. The cost of living is not something that we can escape. The cost of living and the pensionable age moving up by a whole year is something that will preoccupy our conference. As it relates to the pensionable age, there were calls from many for the Barbados Workers Union to add its voice to the debate and perhaps maybe the action in town or wherever by those who were protesting an increase in the pensionable age. But you know why the General Secretary didn't say anything on that? Because it was in this very room at our 76th Annual Delegates Conference back in 2017, where this conference, which is the highest decision-making body in the Barbados Workers Union, after listening to a presentation from the then director of the NIS, which was called for by the Executive Council of the BWU, because the BW sits on the NIS and recognized that we had 2 consecutive actuarial reports where nothing was done about them. the Barbados Workers Union called for him to come and break down some truths to our conference. And what our conference directed us 6 years ago was that the Barbados Workers Union should do two things in particular. One, make sure that it puts pressure to bear on those who have the decisions to make them, but to involve wide consultations. And the second thing was to make sure that we had a pension system, a national pension system that was not only in place for today, but that was in place for tomorrow. If when we come to reflecting on the resolution later, you want to change your mind, then that is what the General Secretary would say. We have a resolution deliberately reflecting on this because we must be sure what we stand for. I heard in a previous speech, I can't remember who said it this morning, making reference to our national hero, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, that when it was time for independence, perhaps he didn't call for a referendum because he didn't think people were ready. And he knew, he could see down the road that independence is what this country needed. And he chose not to go that route. Today, the Barbados Workers Union will choose to go the route where we ask you to revisit it, because either you want a pension system or you don't. And either you get caught up with the narratives about all the things that were done that you can't change, or you accept things as being where they are and try to let us continue to use our influence to make them better. So that's one of the things that we would be reflecting on in a little bit. The conference, as I said, will reflect on a number of things as it relates to the cost of living. One of the main ways that the union will work to address it is through our negotiations. And for those who have access to our report, and all of you can have access to our report, including our invited guests online, the Barbados Workers Union negotiated over 40 contracts in the last year and got increases in most of them. But we recognize that the problems of cost of living are not only localized, they're not only nationalized. It is what the world around us is experiencing. Only a few days ago, about 5 days ago, we heard that over 200 shipments were backed up in the Panama Canal, and that was on account of climate change, you would say, because there was drought. But that climate change impact has a real impact in terms of the economy, because how many ships pass through the Panama Canal? About 40% of those that service the entire world. So what happens with demand and supply? If products ain't getting from point A to point B, what will happen? The cost of living situation in Barbados is not one that is nationally made. A lot of it is internationally, globally driven. But the sad reality is we must also accept that we can't say that to the mother who can't buy school clothes in 2 weeks. We can't say that to the family who doesn't have anything to put on the table, who's struggling to make things meet. So we must devise ways, and it's about you. It's about you. It's about you means that the answers to the questions you seek don't reside only among the Executive Council and the staff of the BWU. But you must be able to say realistically what can be done. One of the most direct ways that we have been able to influence that challenge or address it is at the enterprise level, where on a case-by-case basis we negotiate. I want to conclude at this stage, and I promise you that I won't repeat anything else, anything that I've said here when we go to our business session. You have a lot to say. I want to close by reminding us to let equal rights and justice and the mission of the Barbados Workers Union of improving well-being for all fuel our passion or continue to fuel our passion and determination in spite of whatever negatives are going on around us. I've chosen this morning, you may have seen me making notes, because I had a certain kind of speech in me where I was coming out here to go on all-out attack on some areas that, on reflection, may be better focused on in our business session. But the message this morning has been so stirring and so real, encouraging all of us to look in the mirror and see how that person whose reflection we see can make a difference, not for them, but for the you that is to the left and for the you that is to the right. Because indeed, in making the changes for those around us, we are impacting ourselves. We are impacting that me, that small me, that is our children, our mother, our father, our neighbor, and so on. I want to encourage us to stand at this time. And I want to perhaps have us repeat what President General started with in an exercise where he asks you to turn to either side and point to the people on either side and say it's about you. And the reason why I'm doing this, because if any of us was under any other view when they walked in here about what it's about you mean, certainly after hearing the presenters so far in this opening ceremony, we should have a clearer impression of what it's about you means. It's about love. Because everything that we have heard this morning is not just about love for self, it's love for this country. And the only way that we are going to uplift it, make it better, is if we recognize that that love starts with love for our neighbor. So raise the music. Let me hear rap. Where's the music?
When you've lost count of all the tears you've cried, close your eyes and look into the dark. You'll find the light, open up your heart. It's all about love. It's all about love. It's all about leaning on each other through the hardest times. It's all about love.
It's about you. It's about you. It's about you. It's about you. It's about all of us. Thank you and have a blessed day.